Hi, everybody. This is Quentin Lucas with you. I wanted to make sure we created an opportunity to answer any questions you may have. This morning, I put out a statement sharing on social media a few different thoughts, some of which relating to the tragedy that was experienced yesterday in Brookside. It follows in what has been a violent summer and a violent year in a violent city. And I first want to express my condolences to the family of Sean Brady and condolences to all of the victims of homicides, non fatal shootings in Kansas City. Today, I've had a few, I think, helpful conversations, one of which with the chief of police of the Kansas City Police Department, who talks to me about the fact that there are more patrols in this area and other ones. We are making sure that we have a presence to address these sorts of issues. I think another thing that was discussed today, this with Melissa Johnson, the Director of Public Safety in my office. A lot of the work we do relates to young people. And this is not the first, it's not the second, it's not the third, it's probably not the last tragedy this year that will be committed at the hands of young assailants. The fact that these are teenage juvenile suspects who were picked up for this offense, I think should be concerning to each and every one of us. And while this morning I talked about a law enforcement response, I think we recognize when you have kids who are young ages, this means that it's actually more than just what we can do on the enforcement side, although that's important. We need to understand how a kid that age starts to engage in this type of behavior, why they were not stopped before, how they got firearms, and frankly, what we can do to prevent others from engaging in this sort of behavior in the future. That's where I'll start, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Well, Mayor Lucas, it's Caitlin from KSHB 41. Thanks for making time to speak with us today. What message do you have for business owners, especially in these areas? I mean, obviously, this is on the severe side, something that resulted in tragic loss of life, but we've been reporting on various property crimes, whether it's broken windows and robberies and these areas that keep getting hit. What reassurance do you have for business owners who are worried about their livelihood and their lives?
I think there are a few things that we'll say to business owners. First of all, not just in the last 24 hours, but frankly, over recent months, we have talked to more of them. And let me make this clear, because there was someone from the historic Northeast who wrote me today saying, "You all seem to care a lot about Brookside and Waldo. We have been asking for intervention on Independence Avenue, others on Prospect, others in Midtown, in every part of the city, some even from the Northland." We are working to enhance property crimes enforcement throughout the city. Certainly, personnel is always an issue, but I don't think it is an excuse. We need to make sure that we're deploying where we see concerns. I had a conversation with KCPD leadership today about that. They are looking at more redeployment wherever they can to address these issues. There have been arrests, and there will continue to be arrests. One of the greatest and most challenging areas is when there are minor offenders. If I was going to be honest, a big challenge with our break-ins, our burglaries, car thefts, our teenagers are doing. And teenagers go through a separate system of justice in many cases. But we need to make sure where you are committing severe offenses, there are likely severe consequences. Even where the standard is the best interest of the child, I think it is important for us to make sure that that child, that teenager, that minor is not reoffending, is not putting themselves in further risk later, and is certainly not putting the rest of the community at further risk. So we continue, Caitlin, to identify those who are committing these offenses. We are continuing to enhance our presence of law enforcement officers around the city. You will see more foot patrol in the core of the city, officers on foot, walking a beat, something we hear from people all the time. And you will continue to see more collaboration, not just with county prosecutors' offices, but the juvenile office in Jackson County and our other counties to make sure that where there are serious charges, we are actually seeing those serious charges stick.
Mayor Zach Summers, KCTV5. This question is for Melissa Johnson. If you're speaking at all, the mayor said that uh, you told him that you all do a lot of work related to young people. Can you speak to some of that work?
Well, first and foremost, like Mayor's Night Hoops, Mayor's Night Nets, Mayor's Night Kicks, trying to provide alternative avenues for young people, as well as this past summer. We all know that we do have a youth congregating issue on the plaza. So this summer, myself, along with organizations like KC Common Good, KC 360, we convened a large group of credible messengers, and we would canvass the plaza on weekend evenings from 7 to about 10 p.m. to kind of complement KCPD's increased presence. And we do feel like we were very well received. We would put on our street clothes and try to blend in as much as possible and engage with the youth down there. In addition, Save KC, our new focus deterrent strategy. Unfortunately, a lot of the focused clients, we don't use the word target anymore like we did back in 2014 with Nova. A lot of the clients that we are focusing on are juveniles. I know because I delivered the invitations along with KCPD officers to our first call-in that was held on May 18th. They live at home with their parents. They're 16, 17 years old. And so that effort is really an initiative to focus on those that are most violent in that age demographic that we are aware of. Now, we're not aware of everybody, but for those that we are proactively reaching out to them. And I'm actually at a restorative justice training for our new Save KC strategy right now.
I have a question. It's Lisa from KCUR. Obviously, the city is pretty hamstrung, or hands are tied in terms of like what the police can do given our lack of local control. But what can the city tangibly do to kind of address this spike in property crime? Like what can be done on City Hall side that maybe doesn't require the police department?
I think some of what Melissa just described gets you there. First of all, we need to make sure that we are addressing people who may have a propensity to offend or perhaps have offended in the past. So this is exactly what collaborations like Save KC, Stand Against Violence Kansas City, are looking to do. Earlier this year, there was an event at Morning Star Church at 27th and Prospect, where I broke bread with teenagers and others who have been involved perhaps either in their networks or themselves and public safety issues. And so we'll continue to do that work. The health department has been a key partner in terms of stopping or preventing violent offenses by making sure that there's help for people before they may need or go down the road of offending. And then importantly, from the health department side, we have also seen support of and resources for businesses, but also, of course, where those businesses don't align or coordinate with our city rules. You have seen us shut down establishments where there has been repeat criminal activity. That is a slightly different area than that with which we're dealing in this situation. But in all of those, we're trying to be as holistic as we possibly can. The reality, though, to your point in terms of who controls what, is that all of us need to work together. And my goal is that where we have an ongoing community concern, then we have people who are calling 911, they're calling 311. We work together to make sure that lighting is addressed. When I was out at 31st and Prospect this weekend, people talked about fixing a fence, making sure you don't have some of the usual concerns that may have people involved, making sure our city camera system is up to where it needs to be. That is some of it, but the enforcement side will always be vital and important. And I have heard from lots of people in Kansas City today who want to make sure that we address it.
Mayor Lucas, on a personal note, I understand from a post you shared that you had met Sean previously. So here we have someone who's well known for his involvement in Irish Fest at the beginning of the month. We had a beloved food truck operator, DJ Shields, who was also shot and killed. Do these incidents hit even harder for you personally when you can put a face to the victims' names?
So, here's the thing that I think about a lot and that is a bit crushing about this. Perhaps with the exception of Melissa on here, but perhaps not. I don't know people who have been to more funerals in the last 4 years than I have. And the thing about not just this murder, but the previous one you mentioned and others, is that I've met a good chunk of these people. I talked to Sean. He was in this great mood. He was wondering what we were doing, walking around the business. He's a good man. Good family man. I've read about him in the last day. I'm going to respect the privacy of his family, but this is a tragedy. And what I want people to think about, we jump to the politics quickly, and you know what? That's my job. So I'm willing to do that. but I also remember the humanity of each of these people, and you see how tragic it is. So it isn't about, what community needs more patrolling or what issues are arising or who runs what. To me, in each situation, is about somebody's life who was cut short. And that is something that we deal with way too much in Kansas City. And that's why this morning in my post, I apologize to every family that has been impacted by a homicide this year, everyone who has been impacted by violent crime. I've had family members myself who have been murdered. You do not get over it. It is not quick. And the thing about homicides, almost more than anything else, it is absolute foolishness. It never makes sense. There never is a reason. This isn't misfortune by some disease or some illness. This is just foolishness. And we need to make sure that on the enforcement side, the prevention side, we address it. But I certainly grieve with everyone who's been impacted by homicide this year. And in this situation, Mr. Brady's family.
We can do
Mayor,
one more
this is
quick one.
This is Bob Cronkleton with the Kansas City Star. Do you believe that police and prosecutors are aggressively charging and prosecuting property crimes? And if not, why not? And what needs to change?
You know what? I'm elected the mayor of Kansas City, so I'm going to do my mayor of Kansas City job. And to Salisa's question earlier, we're going to see what we can do in lighting, in public works infrastructure, in the health department to try to enhance at least city support for all of the agencies you mentioned. The criminal justice system is a tough one. I think I said this morning, and I will say my statement speaks for itself. We need to make sure that we see arrests for property offenses. We need to make sure that we are, I think, being as diligent as we possibly can. And I say this thinking about the prosecutors. I know they have challenges in terms of what can get a conviction. So I would hope what we all take from this in our ecosystem of criminal justice is that we are addressing these issues with the seriousness that they deserve, that in every situation we are looking to make sure that offenders are not consistently reoffending in our community. And part of why I said what I said, and I've talked to our police chief, I've talked to our prosecutor previously, and I know they're working hard, both of them. But we will continue to make clear to the public, these types of offenses matter. Your businesses matter. And we are not a city that just says we look at a homicide number, then we go home and do no other policing work and no other enforcement work. So is Kansas City where it needs to be? Look, obviously not. We've got too much crime. We've got too much property crime. I won't sugarcoat it. We are not where we need to be. But that does not mean that there aren't police officers out working hard. There aren't assistant prosecutors out working hard. There isn't a chief prosecutor. There isn't a police chief who's not working hard. And I plan to work with all of them to make sure that the stories we've heard over recent months in all Kansas City neighborhoods, by the way, not just a few, but I work hard to see that the stories we've heard over recent months are not the stories that we hear over the months and the years ahead.